Now that we have some more knowledge of the spells we can make in the object editor, let's take a look at making a spell by using triggers. To begin making a trigger enhanced spell, we first need a spell to enhance. So let's go to the object editor and choose a spell. When we choose our spell, we'll need to think about what type of spell we want to make. For example, if I want an AoE spell, I will have to pick a spell that is an AoE spell from before, like Blizzard. If I want a single target spell, I will need to pick a spell that is a single target spell, like Stormbolt. Let's make a single target spell and base it off Stormbolt. Now we have an identical copy of the Stormbolt spell. So how do we go about enhancing it with triggers? Let's go into the trigger editor. To make it easier to test our spell, I have adjusted the initialization trigger to this, and added a trigger that spawns XP books. To enhance our spell, create a new trigger. I will call mine Superbolt. To start off the trigger, we'll need an event. And we want an event that will trigger exactly when the spell is casted. In the list of events, we can find an event called Unit, a generic unit event. This event will trigger after any unit in the map has casted a spell. After you've picked this event, you will again get a long list of events to choose from. Notice these two events. A unit starts the effect of an ability, and a unit begins casting an ability. They look like they will trigger at the same time, but there's a difference between them. The a unit starts the effect of an ability will trigger after the effects of the spells have been applied, and the mana has been drained. But a unit begins casting an ability will trigger after the effect has been applied, but before the mana has been drained. This makes it possible for people to abuse the spell to have the effects applied but no mana drained. Therefore, we choose a unit starts the effect of an ability. To continue, our trigger will have to make sure it only runs when Superbolt is casted. We will create a new condition and use the ability comparison. We can then compare the ability that is casted and check if it's equal to the custom Stormbolt. Now, what actions should we choose to enhance our spell? I will be using 5 types of actions: special effects, sound effects, mechanics and logic, custom scripts, I will add some of them to fix some leaks, and dummy units, which I will explain later. I've set up a new map to show you the different spell actions. First up is spell effects. We add a new action and we sort by spell effects. Now the first 2 actions are create special effect at point and create special effect on unit. Create a special effect at point is as simple as it sounds. You specify a point and the special effect will be spawned there. Create a special effect on unit gives you the ability to spawn an effect that is attached to a unit. Here you get to choose where on the unit you want to spawn the effect, but there is no drop-down list here, and you have to know the exact names for the attachment points. Here's an overview over all the points you can attach an effect to. And here are some examples of these kind of effects.
What do you need? Aye, my lord. What do you need? Aye, my lord. What do you need? Aye, my lord.
Before we look at destroy special effect, let's just quickly go through the rest of the list. So in the top part here, we can change the visual of the special effect, then we can change its position, and then we can change its orientation. And at last we can also change how fast the spell animation should be. Now, destroy special effect. It's a very simple action. It does what it's called. It destroys a special effect in the game. The reason I wanted to explain it as the last action is because this action is very important to use to make sure our spell doesn't leak. You might be wondering what a leak is, and it's simply just something that is used in the game that never gets destroyed. For example, if we create an effect that just has a short animation and we call it again and again and again, it looks like it's removed from the game when it vanishes because the effect isn't there anymore, but it's actually still there, it's just invisible. And your computer stores this effect in its memory. This can eventually fill up your memory and cause huge lags, so you might understand now why it's so important to destroy the effects after you've created them. Now I've explained to you what special effects are, and you should also know a little bit about leaks now. Let's look at an example of creating special effects and how you can avoid leaks. Here is an example of creating a special effect. Before, we used to put the position of unit or center of region right into the function that create the effect. This is not a good way to do it because it will leak a position, meaning the computer will remember this position for as long as you're in the game. We can avoid this by using a temporary variable and using that variable in our special effect function instead. Now, to make sure our effect also doesn't leak, we destroy it. Now, the only way to destroy the position is with a custom script. You can find it under Actions and Custom Script. Here we can write one line of code, and the code you see here is the JAS code to remove a variable. This removes it from the memory. Next up is sounds. Some of the spell effects come with built-in sounds. This can be beneficial if the default sound is the sound that you want, but if you want to replace the sound, then you have to use a third-party program, unfortunately. I will not show you how to use it, but I will leave a link in the description to a program that can do this. If you have a spell effect that don't contain any sound, you can play extra sounds with triggers. And here are all the different sound actions you can use. If we choose the play sound action and click on the sound word, we see that we have no sounds to choose from. The reason for this is that we first have to choose the sounds we want our map to load. We do this in the sound editor. Here you can see all the 7,495 sounds that are available in the game. I'm going to go down to the peasant. You can play all the sounds to see which one you like.
Righto.
To use it in a trigger, we have to right-click it and choose Use as Sound. The sound will then be saved as a variable in our map. Now there is one important thing you have to know. The sound variables can either be a normal sound or a 3D sound. If we go into the properties of the sound variable, you can see whether your sound variable is a 3D sound or not. We can turn this on and off as we like. The reason you need to care about this is because there are two main ways to play sounds. Either as a sound that sounds like it's right in front of you, or as a sound that comes from a specific direction. Normal sounds are used in these two actions, and 3D sounds are used in these two. While we're here, if you go to File, you can import your own sounds. If we now try to add sounds, you can choose between them from the variable list. Dummy units is also a useful concept to learn. They're used to give you a way to create points, which you can cast spells from and spawn effects on or /to. There's not a built-in way to do this, so we use dummy units as a workaround. Essentially what you do is that you copy a unit, make it invisible and impossible to interact with. Then you use triggers to spawn this unit at the position of where your hero wants to send a spell. And then you use the dummy unit to send spells from that unit or position, spawn effects, etc. To make a copy of a unit into a dummy unit, you need to change these fields. The fields that are blank here just means that you have to remove anything that are on those fields. And finally, we get to mechanics and logic. So far we've gone through adding effects, sounds, fixing leaks and creating dummy units, but our spell is missing its mechanics, like how much damage will it do, which objects will it be able to target, and how it scales when you level it up. Some of this we will do with triggers, but some of it we can do in the object editor too. First off, let's see how our spell is working right now. I'm gonna rename the spell to Superbolt so it's easier to recognize. Then I'm gonna create a custom hero, remove his existing spells and add our spell. When we test the spell, we can see that it's working like a normal Stormbolt. We don't want that. We want to add our own mechanics to the spell, So we need to change some fields in the object editor. First we want to do the damage with triggers. This way we have more control over how the damage is done. So we're going to set it to 0 for all of its levels. Now I want to make this spell be able to target both units and buildings. I want it to have quite a small impact on units, but a huge damage to buildings. We can't do this in the object editor, but with triggers this is possible. Let's make our action for the damage. In our Super Bolt trigger, I'm going to add a new action. It's going to be a if-then-else action. If you're familiar with programming, you might know this as an if-else statement. What it basically does is to check if something is true or not. If it is true, it does an action, and if it is not true, then it does a different action. The condition for our damage will be to check if our target is a unit. We're going to open the first part here. We don't want to check the triggering unit, we want to check the target unit of ability being cast. And instead of a structure, we want to check if it's a ground unit. Now our condition is correct. Let's create the action that will happen if this is true. First, we sort for unit. As you can see, there are a lot of things we can do, but we want damage target, which is at the bottom. We'll change the damage to be done to target unit of ability being cast, the same as before. Now for the damage, we don't want it to be the same all the time. We want it to change with each level of the Super Bolt spell. We can do this by creating a base damage and multiplying it for each level, for example. To do this, let's add the arithmetic function. Let's set the base damage to 25. And we'll change the plus sign to multiply. Now there is one important thing to think about. You see the numbers are numbers with decimals. This is because you can't do any math on different type of numbers. They have to be the same type. In the Warcraft 3 editor, these types of numbers are called real numbers. If you know some programming from before, you might also know them as float numbers. The reason I'm mentioning this is because the level of our hero is an integer, which is a number without decimals. So we need to change it to a real number to do math with it. There is a function that can do this called conversion, convert integer to real. And we then get to choose which integer we want to change to real. We choose unit level of ability for unit and set the ability to Super Bolt. We can also change our attack type and damage type. I'm going to set mine to magic and magic. Lastly, we need to set our else action to do nothing. We can now just copy this action and change our target to a structure and the damage to something bigger. I'm also going to change our attack type to siege because that will give our spell more damage towards buildings. But to be able to hit a building, we have to make sure that the spell we're enhancing has buildings allowed as target. Go into the Super Bolt spell and add mechanical and structure to the targets. This will allow it to also target buildings. Then copy it to all the levels. Right now, our damage from the triggers are taken instantly when the spell is casted, but our spell also has a missile that will stun the target when it reaches it. To make the damage and the spell missile synchronized, we can change the missile speed to something really high, so it will almost be instant also. Now let's test the spell.
I am not afraid. As you wish.
As you can see, it does a lot of damage to buildings,
For honor.
and not so much to units. Now maybe this makes the spell a little bit overpowered, but wouldn't it be cool if the spell also used Blizzard when it's targeting a unit? However, there is no trigger we can use to just spawn a spell. We could use a trigger to order our hero to cast Blizzard, but then he would need to have Blizzard as a spell, and he also wouldn't be able to cast it at the same time that he's casting other spells. This is where we can use dummy units to cast a spell for us. So I'm going to create a dummy unit from the instructions I gave you earlier. Now we're going to spawn our dummy unit right under the target. But to not leak any position, we will create a new variable that will store the position of the target of the spell. And to not create any leaks, we will add the small custom script that will remove our variable after we're done using it. In the parentheses after remove location, you have to write UDG underscore and then the name of the variable that you want to remove. Drag it to the bottom so it is executed last. Then we're going to add an action to spawn our dummy unit. We'll use the create unit facing angle and change the unit to dummy. Then we need to change the unit owner to the owner of the unit casting the spell, which is the triggering unit. And instead of using a region, we will now use our position variable. Then we need to create an expiration timer so that our dummy unit eventually will disappear. I'm just gonna set it to 5 seconds. Make sure to drag it below the create unit action. Drag your set variable action to the top, if not the dummy unit won't work. Add a if then else function with the possibility for multiple functions. Then we add our condition, which will check if the unit is a ground unit. It will be identical to our condition in the first if statement. Before we tell our dummy unit to cast Blizzard, we need to create a custom Blizzard ability. This is because the normal Blizzard ability needs mana to be drained, and our dummy unit doesn't have any mana. So set all the mana requirements to 0. And just to have things organized, I'm gonna set the editor suffix to superbolt in parentheses. Now we can make our dummy unit cast Blizzard. Add a new action to the then actions. Go into the unit action types and find add ability. Set the ability to custom Blizzard. And set the unit to last created unit. Create another then action and go into the unit types. This time you have to find set level of ability for unit. Then set the ability to custom Blizzard. And the unit to last created unit. The level of the spell we set to the level that the hero has in Superbolt. To get this value, we use the unit level of ability for unit, select Superbolt as the ability, and make sure to drag it under our first action. Now we're gonna add the last action. This will order our dummy unit to cast a spell. Sort for unit actions and find the issue order targeting a point. In this list, you can see all the different actions and spells that has a point as a target. You can see that there is no spell that has a name Custom Blizzard. This can be a bit confusing in the beginning, But our spell is based on the normal blizzard. So if we order our dummy unit to cast the normal blizzard, it will actually cast whatever spell it has access to that is either the normal blizzard or any spell that is a copy of the normal blizzard. Now set the unit to the last created unit and the region to our position variable. And at last, move our action to the bottom. Now finally, we get to test our spell. And look at that, it's raining ice creams. Now you have lots of tools to be creative and create all kinds of different spells. There is one problem with our trigger enhanced spell though, and that is the case where two heroes cast our Super Ball spell at exactly the same time. Right now our spell does not have the ability to have multiple instances of itself, and it's possible to fix this by making it multi-unit instantiable as it's called, or MUI for short. It's not too hard to fix, but I will create a separate video for this. Anyway, if you're still watching, thank you so much for watching this far. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. I would appreciate it if you liked the video, and subscribe if you want more content. And yeah, thanks again for watching, and have a great day.